Welcome to the Glenn Beck program. I'm Judge Andrew Napolitano in for Glenn. He'll be back tomorrow night. The Elena Kagan hearings, fireworks at the G20, and will the government be able to shut down the internet? As Thomas Jefferson once wrote, when the people fear the government, there is tyranny. When the government fears the people, there is liberty. Follow me. America. Today, the Senate Judiciary Committee began hearings on President Obama's nomination of Elena Kagan to the Supreme Court of the United States. It goes without saying that this is one of the more important things that the President and the Senate do. Presidents come and go, senators are defeated and retire, Supreme Court justices serve for life. What to expect? We can expect that the Democrats will praise her as brilliant and qualified, and the Republicans will try to show that her views of the relationship of the federal government to individuals are out of step with what most folks expect and inconsistent with what the Constitution requires. The Constitution is the supreme law of the land. Why do I say that? Because the Constitution itself says that it is. It is the basis of the American rule of law. Why do I say that? Because everyone who works for any government in the U.S., local, state, and federal, takes an oath to uphold the Constitution. The people have a right to expect that their representatives and their judges will uphold the Constitution, come what may. Is that a realistic expectation or a fanciful one? Well, a few months ago, I asked Congressman Jim Clyburn, the number 3 ranking Democrat in the House, about where in the Constitution the Congress gets the power to regulate health care. His answer was very telling. Take a listen.
Where in the Constitution is the federal government charged with maintaining people's health?
Well, there's not in the Constitution. There's nothing in the Constitution that says the federal government has got anything to do with most of the stuff that we do.
Okay, there's one member of Congress who does not believe he's committed to following the Constitution. Unfortunately, most other members of Congress agree with him. In recent years, Congress has voted to give federal agents the power to write their own search warrants. Even though the Constitution says that only judges may do so, Congress has voted to make it a crime for you to tell anyone you've received a self-written search warrant. Even though the Constitution says Congress shall make no law abridging the freedom of speech, it has voted to put a federal bureaucrat between you and your doctor, even though the Supreme Court has ruled that what you tell your doctor and what he or she tells you is none of the government's business. And Congress has voted to give billions to its favorite banks and labor unions, even though the Constitution nowhere permits that. What does this have to do with the Supreme Court? Everything. You see, it is the court's job to decide if Congress has been faithful to the Constitution. Not whether what Congress has done is wise or fair, but is it constitutional? That's why federal and some state judges, and certainly justices of the Supreme Court, have life tenure, so they don't get caught up in the politics of the moment like the president and the Congress do. Don't like what BP did in the Gulf? Intimidate $20 billion from them. Wish the economic crisis hadn't occurred? Print some cash and give it away. Is that what the Constitution permits? Of course not. That's why we have life tenure judges, and that's why we have a Supreme Court. Think about it. When it works as it should, the judiciary is the anti-democratic branch of government. It keeps the other 2 branches confined within the Constitution. If this were not so, nothing would prevent the majority from taking the liberty or the property of the minority. That brings us back to Elena Kagan. Will she vote to protect freedom? Will she vote to let the Congress regulate any activities or tax any events it wants? She will soon have the power, with 4 other justices, to permit or to stop abortions, to stop the president and the military, to tell the president and the Congress and the states how to stay within the Constitution. How will she use all that power? Here's Republican Senator Jeff Sessions, who's also the ranking member of the Senate Judiciary Committee. Senator Sessions, welcome here. What will you ask Elena Kagan tomorrow, and what do you expect her to tell you?
I'm going to talk to her about her philosophy and whether or not we have a commitment that she's part of the mainstream understanding that our Constitution must be followed whether you like it or not. The American people believe that by overwhelming margin, but many of our justices are quite proud of their activist tendencies, and many are praised for taking steps to advance the law, which means really to advance the political agenda of the judge.
This morning at the
that will be some of the things we'll talk about.
This morning at the Judiciary hearing, Senator Sessions, you made a very impassioned and compelling argument about progressivism. I mean, this is the philosophy that basically says you can stretch or twist the Constitution any way you want so the government can regulate any activity, tax any event that it thinks it needs to. Is she a progressive? Does she believe that? And can you find this out before you have to vote on her?
Well, we're going to ask about that, and we definitely will. I know that E.J. Dionne, writing about the hearings today, called on the progressive members of the Senate to basically rise up, and he made reference to Brandeis, who I think was a known progressive type jurist. So it does look like progressivism is on the rise again, and it suggests and implies, even states, that the Constitution is an impediment. It gets in the way of our ability to carry on the agenda we want, like the constitutional right to keep and bear arms. Oh, goodness, we don't like that. That's an impediment to our vision of what's good for a big city, so we'll just read it out of the Constitution.
All right.
This is a dangerous philosophy.
When then Judge Sonia Sotomayor appeared before your committee, and you or one of the other Republicans asked her if the Second Amendment guaranteed an individual right to keep and bear arms, she said it does. In today's case on the Second Amendment, she said it doesn't, or she can't find where it does, to quote her almost precisely. Question, does it matter what they say at your hearings? Once they're confirmed, they do whatever they want anyway.
Well, I said in my statement that words at the hearing are not just enough. Your actions and your record speak too. Sometimes they speak more loudly. So we need to dig deeply into that. Senator Coburn raised that in his comments. He said, why don't you just tell us the truth, what you think? We've got to get beyond this bland statement that I will just follow the law, because, as you know, Judge, for an activist judge, they can simply redefine the meaning of the words in the law and claim they're following it.
Right.
And that's the danger we have.
Justice Jackson, for whom a young William Rehnquist clerked, once said they're infallible because they're final. They're not final because they're infallible. There's no appeal from them. But isn't her confirmation a foregone conclusion? And if it is, what's the most that those of us who believe in limited government can hope for from these hearings?
I think we need to expose the idea that, as you indicated in your talking points, ceding power to the judiciary to set policy is an anti-democratic act. It reduces the power of every American citizen, and it's a danger to the heritage we've been given, and we need to fight back. One thing, elections make a difference. Maybe some of the senators, maybe the next presidential election will talk about these issues with clarity, and votes can make a difference in the long run. But right now, there is a huge Democratic majority who will tend to want to support the president.
Right.
But if this nominee is not clear about her commitment to the law, I think